Let's break the political talk show mold. Anything worth doing is hard, and that includes being a good citizen. Our mission is to help you be that better citizen by letting you hear about stuff you might not know, which will make everyone think you're so smart, or by giving you a chance to listen to interviews and debates on a wide variety of subjects that might actually allow you to form new opinions in the privacy of your own mind. I'm Justin Oldham, and you are listening to the Politics and Patriotism Show here on the Stitcher Smart Radio Network. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to a very classical edition of the Politics and Patriotism Show. Over the next 45 minutes, I'm going to be sharing with you a golden oldie from our vaults. This is a conversation that we had in October of 2011 with contrarian investor L Quist. He's a very well-known financial author in his field who has been doing extensive research into the last 10 boom and bust cycles that we've encountered here in the United States. And he's been one of those people that says we're about to fall off the fiscal cliff. All I can say to that is, duh. But we wanted to bring this to you because this show actually predates our time with the Stitcher Smart Radio Network. Once upon a time, we were just a struggling little podcast, wandering sort of free range out there in the wasteland. We had no sponsors. We had no support. We had no idea if we were going to live one day to the next. It was all hand to mouth, and L Quist was actually our very first author interview, and Buster was very good about giving us his time, so we enjoyed the interview, and lo and behold, in the not-too-recent past here, several of you actually wrote into the show and said, hey, we see this on the Google search, but it's not showing up in the Stitcher engine. Where is it? We want to hear it. So you have asked, we have responded, here it is. So buckle up and let's get ready to hear from L Quist, who's going to tell us about the aftermath of greed.
Send lawyers, guns, and money. This has hit the fan.
Justin, it's nice to have this visit with you. I was born, my name is Herbert L. Quist, and I go by HL, but everybody calls me Buster, and I podcast in the name of the Mythbuster, which, of course, my purpose is debunk myths. You know, we all are subscribed to, unfortunately, a lot of myths, and that's been one of my purposes in life, but I've been around a long time. I was born in the depths of the Great Depression in a little town called Green Bay, Wisconsin. And my folks moved when I was fairly young, 13, 14 years old, and moved to the Southwest. So that was a major change in my life. And I graduated from school in both high school and college in Albuquerque, New Mexico, at the University of New Mexico. My background education-wise is history, actually a Bachelor of Arts degree, but I graduated with honors in history. And I was a fairly well-known athlete in the U.S. I made 4 U.S. track and field teams in the 50s and early 60s, and was the University of New Mexico's first All-American in track and field. So anyway, and I moved to Phoenix in 1972. I've been associated with financial services all my life. I did sell my companies in the late 70s. I had companies in Texas, New Mexico, and here in Arizona, and I sold out, decided to do something else. And for 10 years, I spent in the real estate business in the development side. And when I sold that project and returned to financial services and asset management again, and I've been in that business basically since that time, which was in the early 90s, and that's when I began writing and really studying the markets after the real estate collapse in 1990-91, which dramatically affected me, obviously. And so I set out to find out what in the world caused this, and that led to my study of boom and bust cycles, and which I've written, I think, pretty effectively on, and it's been a very good educational tool for people to learn what in the heck is the cause of these boom and bust cycles that seem to appear every 10 years. And that's what the aftermath of greed is all about. It's a really an educational tool, and of course it gives us a macro introspection into markets and what moves markets. And obviously, if you see the change coming, you see the bust coming, you can benefit by it by getting the heck out of Dodge. So that kind of brings us to this moment in time in our interview, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
I'm Luke Herbert, and this program is supported by SpaceLinkRadio.com.
Well, as we progress in the conversation here, can you please tell us about your website, your blog, and your podcast so that our listeners can follow along with those things during our conversation?
Right. There's I think a wealth of information that's free to our listeners, and you can find it under the aftermath of greed, or you can just Google L Quist, Quist, and you'll find the links. The blog site address obviously is quite long, but you can just hit Google with the aftermath of greed, and that'll pop up, and it'll give you the site. And you can review my newsletter there. I don't have the stock recommendations posted there because that's for people who subscribe to the newsletter, but all of the background information and up-to-date view on the economy is there under the Contrarian Market View. And then I also do a podcast usually on Sundays once a week. It outlines, what the events are of the week and what I see coming the week ahead and so forth. And I usually use one topic to do that. But that's what I'm all about. My books are all listed there. It just kind of revolves as to one or another. I've got 5 or 6 books. The last 2 being on the markets, the aftermath of greed, and how to profit from the coming inflationary boom, which is we've experienced since 2009. And I've had the good fortune, Justin, of my forecasts ever since the market crash of 1987 have preceded the event, and I've been able to warn people that there was a change in the economy coming, and the reasons for it because of my study and understanding of these cycles. And people have profited from it, and I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. So I think people will find it educational and very useful.
Well, I know that I've been finding it very enlightening as I've gone back to do my homework for this show. And you and I actually have a few things in common, aside from the fact that we're podcasters. We also have backgrounds in history. I have a bachelor's in history and also a bachelor's in political science. And like yourself, I couldn't help but notice during my education that there's a lot of patterns to these things, and
Right.
those who do not know their history are certainly damned to repeat it, but it seems like we're stuck on this merry-go-round and we keep getting flogged with it over and over again. And just off the top of your head, how many boom and bust cycles would you say that we've been through?
Well, the book starts, the Aftermath of Greed starts with the 1974 bust, and I think that is so critical and so important. We've had 11 since then, depending upon what you consider today's environment, a boom or a bust. But I think the 1974 oil embargo, people remember the oil embargo, and the economy just came to a stop overnight. And remember Watergate, remember Nixon's resignation. Those are things that people stick in people's mind. But there was something very, very critical and important about this bust, and that's the reason why I started it there. In 1971, the total federal debt was $436 billion, or 37% of the GDP in this country. But what did Nixon do? He's remembered for Watergate probably as much as anything. But he really took us completely off the gold standard at that time. In other words, the U.S. would no longer honor the repatriation of U.S. dollars for gold bullion at, I think it was $44 an ounce at the time. But so what that did is it freed the U.S. and printing as much fiat money as it wanted to, without any restriction or any anchor or any base to the monetary system. And of course, what we know, and our listeners know very well, is from $436 billion, the debt now has climbed to $15 trillion. And if you look at a profile of it on a chart, it looks like an inverted hockey stick. And slowly climbing, and by 1980 it was $1 trillion. Well, then it's grown exponentially. And what anybody knows that follows commodities or the stock market or anything else, anything that grows exponentially in a parabolic move has got to end. And what it usually does is that there's a massive correction, or that chart changes to a suddenly you see the line going north, then you see it reach a peak or a point, and then it just absolutely collapses. And that is the point that we are at this present moment. So there's been a lot of changes in between. From I go through the boom and bust cycles, and 77 started a boom which ended in 1980 with stagflation and the crash in 1980. And for every 10-year period, then we go to 82, we go to 92, and we go to 2002, we had booms and busts in those periods of time. So I think it's very, very instructional, and to understand that there are common denominators in every one of these boom and bust cycles. And they are, number one, what creates them is Congress and the acts that it passes, the Federal Reserve and the monetary system, the Treasury and fiscal policy, and probably one of the governing factors is public sentiment. You know, what people do, manias, the greatest book ever written probably was Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. It was written in 1846, and it tells what happens with people when they get, when everything comes into place, through legislation, whatever, that creates a mania, like our real estate mania from 2003 to 2007.
You deal with facts and figures all the time, and that contrasts very sharply to myself. Actually, I'm known as a storyteller. My biggest claim to fame is conspiracy fiction. And the reason that I point this out is that you and I are actually using two different vehicles to talk about much the same thing. I learned a long time ago that if you look like a nail, you're going to get hammered. And the
There's
fact
always somebody there with a hammer.
That's true. That's very true. Now, when I took the route that you have taken, and I tried to speak about these things factually, I encountered a phenomenal amount of resistance. But when I put on my storyteller's hat, when I wrapped my thesis in a warm, sugar-coated blanket of this is just fiction, then I found that I was getting a lot more converts, and there were plenty of people who were saying, hey, I read this book or that book that you did, and I just happened to notice that there are these parallels to the real world, and all I do is just kind of smile and say, you don't say, really? That's interesting.
Well, that's a very good point. I wrote, my first book was written in 1999, was Secrets, a novel of golf and politics. And basically, when for a third of or halfway through the book, it's a murder mystery about a golfer and who finds a secret and then ends up winning the U.S. Open and so forth. But in telling what I wanted to, the message I wanted to communicate to the reader, obviously, was a financial one and a political one. And by the time I have the reader hooked on the murder mystery, he wants to find out how it ends, and then I get to tell him what I want to tell him. So, that is a tremendous device, and it reaches a broader spectrum of people than if you just wrote a financial book.
This program is brought to you by ShadowFusionBooks.com.
That's true, and maybe I'm just a little bit too jaded, maybe I'm just a little bit too cynical, but the way I see it, doing things as I do it, the people who get it will be enlightened. The people who don't get it will simply be entertained, and neither one is a bad thing.
Oh, sure. A lot of people that read Secrets, they're just entertained by the golf because it really isn't interesting. It is actually, it was based on a true story. I mean, a true events that happened. One of my good friends was the one that was murdered, and so I knew the story extremely well, and so it is an intriguing mystery, and it's if somebody's interested in golf, it's got a lot of interesting golf stories in it, but the main story, of course, is the political and the financial one.
Is your political baggage worn out or in need of repair? Is it out of style? If you're a veteran politician or new to the game, you need to check out the latest offering from J Pro Industries. We're proud to present our newest product line, Political Baggage. These traveling accessories are ideal for the elected official or the practicing attorney on the go. All of our items are available in DNA-resistant black or gray. Our operators are standing by. Call now and we'll set you up with a leak-proof body bag with easy grip handles. It's ideal for storing or moving those skeletons that you may have in your closet. Our versatile suitcases contain many watertight compartments that are ideal for concealing, storing, or otherwise caring for your undocumented cash. We offer two-faced makeup cases, ideal for those spur-of-the-moment press conferences or those late-night outings with your favorite paid escort. Don't accept cheaper substitutes. Ask for political baggage today.
I have a lot of baggage, and everybody has rummaged through it for years.
Okay, now, as I have reviewed some of the things I've seen that you say on YouTube, you make some interesting points about the historical patterns of what we're seeing and what we're going through. And outside of my fellow political science nerds, I don't hear anybody talking about this. So if you would please, I'd like to have you start with the Cloward Piven strategy.
Well, the Cloward Piven, that was the Columbia professors, the radicals, in the 60s. A lot of us remember what went on in the 60s because we're seeing a repeat of it, obviously, right now. But Cloward and Piven's theory, they had a number of theories, but the way to destroy capitalism and bring down the government of the United States was to overburden the Treasury and the government with entitlements. In other words, create such more and more and more entitlements, pensions, we're talking about health benefits, we're talking about, Social Security, we're talking about the whole package. And then at some point in time, the government would go broke. Well, their theory is coming true. I mean, that's exactly what's happened. Greece is the microcosm. They've burdened the the government with so many payments and entitlements and salaries and the bureaucracy and whatever is that they've destroyed the economy and the government of Greece, and of course eventually they'll default. But that's what's happening here. That's where the protests are, is that people that are on the bureaucrats that are receiving good salaries and pensions and health insurance for life and all that. Well, of course, they want that to continue, and that the money is not going to be there. We're seeing cities go bankrupt, like Harrisburg, PA, or Vallejo, California. All of these, they've had to cut services, cut pensions, cut salaries. But that's what the Cloward Piven strategy was, is to destroy capitalism, was to just load it up with these benefits that cities and state governments and the federal government couldn't pay.
Are you a politician? Do you work for a politician? Do you want to be a politician? Do you think you have what it takes to go to Washington, D.C. and put up with all that sin and all that undocumented cash? Well, if that sounds like your version of a perfect career opportunity, then hey, we got a deal for you. J-Pro Industries presents Scandal Wash. Use in place of your favorite bath gel, hair gel, or tooth remover for just 3 weeks, and you won't be leaving DNA evidence behind anywhere. Scandal Wash is not recommended for use as a contraceptive. People who would like to have children should not use Scandal Wash. Keep this product away from lobbyists and small children. Please do not confuse children for small lobbyists. Do not use or share near an open flame. Don't settle for cheaper substitutes. Ask for Scandal Wash today. Scandal Wash. Okay, now I am very skeptical when it comes to UFOs, and I place no credence at all in Bigfoot or reptilians. But to me, personally, the most real conspiracy I can think of is government, and I'm reminded of Machiavelli's maxim that power centralizes, and I think that that's one of the most misunderstood truths of our time. So when I look at what's going on in government today, what I see is the elites in our society fighting so hard, tooth and nail, to enrich themselves that, from their point of view, crashing the economy, destroying the government, and looting the treasury, no matter what harm that does to the society, to them that's a legitimate strategy.
Yeah, I call them the masters of the universe. And you know, all of these cycles that we've been through, I mean, you can go back and you can trace, you know, the leadership, the masters of the universe. The protesters today are focusing on Wall Street, but really it was a handful of people that created the environment to make all of this, you know, the subprime deal and everything, make it possible to happen. You know, and these are the policymakers, these are the politicians, these are the head of the Federal Reserve, the head of the Treasury, the politicians that crafted the legislation and so forth. And I go down through a list of people that created the environment to make this subprime deal go, which absolutely devastated middle-class America. But you can always pinpoint a number of people, you know, the Alan Greenspans, who just did everything he could to repeal Glass-Steagall and lobbied for it for 10 years. This was the bill that was enacted in 1933 that prevented banks from making risky investments. He was the center point in getting this repealed. And, of course, that enabled the banks to get into all types of derivatives, investments, and so forth. But there's a whole cast of characters, from Chris Dodd and Barney Frank to Franklin Raines to Clinton and Bush and Lawrence Summers and Robert Rubin and Phil Graham, who allowed the derivatives his wife served on the board of Enron, and they just passed a bill that enabled Enron to do all of these wild and risky things with derivatives, which ultimately created the demise of Enron. But, you know, there is this, I call them the masters of the universe, and we're just victims of the policy that they enabled to be passed, you see.
Okay, now speaking of policy, what is, in your opinion, their overall agenda, and how does their end game play out?
Well, we can see what happened is that there were a lot of people that made absolute fortunes in the subprime mess. And they walked away. They have no accountability whatsoever. Look at the bonuses that were paid to some of these people which I affectionately refer to as Goldman Sachs. You know, these people made $1 million bonuses, or like this one guy got $100 million bonus for selling subprime debt. Well, they've all left and gone someplace else, and they've tucked their money away someplace. But you know, they've made theirs, and they're gone, and they have no accountability. And of course, they didn't suffer the consequences of their doing, and the plans that they created, and the strategy they created. But it's all about power and money, and it has been since written history, I guess. But that's what's happening, and And even though we may see the end of our monetary system, we may see the end, what I call the Western-centric monetary system, the paper money, the fiat money system, is we're seeing it in its last stages now. That's what's happening. The people that created the environment that created all this debt and so forth, they're gone. Greenspan's gone, Paulson's gone, Lawrence Summers, Robert Rubin, they're all gone. They're comfortably retired. They put their money away someplace, but they accomplished what they wanted to accomplish, and they don't have to deal with the consequences.
Now, what are the consequences for people like you and me, realistically? Because this whole fiat money thing, this only ends one way, as far as I know, and my limited understanding. So, please clue me in a little more here.
Well, I subscribe to the von Mises theory of, he's termed it the crack-up boom. All the creation of fiat money will end badly. That's the parabolic curve that we see, the creation of all this debt, the $15 trillion. What we're right at this, absolutely at this moment, Justin, what we're seeing is all of this coming to a head. It's just been postponed and kicked down the road, for all of these different cycles. But now we're at the point of no return, is that we've created so much debt, it can't be serviced, just like Greece. It cannot be serviced. So something is going to happen. And that's, of course, what I address here recently. I just gave 2 talks on Wednesday on this very topic. And that is there's something that has to occur that will change our monetary system. And whether it's going back to the gold standard, there's all kinds of theories. But what's going to happen immediately is, in my opinion, is the Fed's going to have to step up and start buying treasuries again. I call it the last rodeo. In other words, they're going to try to inflate the problem away by creating more debt and more money, and it'll be the end of our monetary system. But we could have a year, we could have 2 years of increased inflation. Unemployment's not going to change. Personal income's not going to change. But what they want to do is inflate assets, stocks, commodities, gold, what have you. But it'll all end very badly. It could be a year or 2 years or whatever. But that's the point we're at right now. That's why this is all so critical.
Okay, now I have said for many years in my writings and in this particular format here on this show many different times that I believe that politics and patriotism are 2 sides of the same civic coin, and the way we spend this currency does matter. And as idealistic and naive as that sounds, I can't help but think that in this case our vote still matters. So am I right or am I wrong?
Well, I think patriotism is so critical, and of course, the masters of the universe, they've abandoned that principle. You can't be patriotic if what you've created or what you've done is going to unwind what has been created in this country for over a period of 250 years. You can't be patriotic if you don't look at the consequences of what you've created. And that's why how can Rubin and Summers and Greenspan and Paulson and Raines and all of these people be patriotic? They had to know. Greenspan had to know that what he was creating and the whole cash out financing and refi program that he created and abandoned Glass-Steagall and repealed Glass-Steagall, he had to know that this would be the result, which would be the undermining of America. It'll be the undermining of the capitalistic system, and that's where we are today.
Okay, now, just for the sake of intellectual stimulation here, what kind of mindset is required to decide that the destruction of Western civilization, as we have known it, is worth a profit motive in this case?
Well, you can go to and a lot of people do subscribe to the theory that the whole goal of the masters of the universe is to create a downfall, create an economic chaos, and of course then you create a one world order or one world currency. the solution to all of this that they're going to offer us is what we need to do is we need to consolidate all of the power, consolidate all of the into a one world type of order and currency. That's where the ultimate bailout is coming. Is people call it the Bancor, the new global currency. In other words, trade in all the euros and all the U.S. dollars and all of the other currencies for a new currency, create a new monetary system. And, you know, Europe is the example with the euro. Bring the 17 countries together, and it was nice to have one currency, and you wouldn't have to convert the currencies when you did business from France to Belgium to Italy to whatever. And then they slipped in a new constitution and said, well, we need to tie all these countries together under one new rule of law. You know, we don't need to be nationalistic. We don't have to. We need to bury our petty differences. We all need to be one, and we need to be under one constitution. Well, look at the problem. Look at where they are today. The whole thing is going to fall apart. But the solution to the problem, of course, is let's combine all of our assets and our money and our control under one government, which will be the new world government. So that's where they're headed. You know, there's a lot been written about it, and I think we're seeing it come to pass.
You know, what you say makes sense, because as a trained political scientist, I'm well aware of the notion of an engineered crisis, and you cause something really bad to happen, and then when the political and social elites ride to the rescue, then we're all so grateful to them that in the aftermath of the whole thing, while the ashes are still settling around us, that they can make us demand what they already planned to do to us.
Well, you know, there's Greenspan, as brilliant a man as he is, he had to understand where this was all going to end. I mean, for him to deny it in his book, you know, that he wrote, The Age of Turbulence, he denies that he had any understanding of that this was not a planned, you know, that he wasn't responsible. I mean, he spent 600 pages telling us that he wasn't responsible, but he had to know that this is where it was going to end up.
Okay, now in one of your recent podcasts, you've talked about the possibility that the Treasury is going to repeg the currency to gold at an astonishingly high rate. And if you would, please, I'd like you to elaborate on that.
You are listening to another Politics and Patriotism podcast. Find us online through iTunes.
Well, I went to a 3-day seminar here in Phoenix with some of the best minds in the country. They had a number of Canadians there. Eric Sprott was there. I think he's a very brilliant man. And a paper was presented at this summit that said what the Fed is going to do or should do to prevent unprecedented inflation is they're going to have to change the monetary base. And if you took the formula of which is still in the Bretton Woods agreement back in 1946 or 47, whenever it was, is that if you divide the monetary base with the amount of gold that supposedly the government has, that the Federal Reserve has, the 261 million ounces, that equates to $10,000 per ounce. And then he's talking about the Fed calling in all of the personally held gold and exchanging it for new federal notes that would remonetize the banks. It would tie and peg the dollar then to gold at, say, $10,000 an ounce or whatever the number is, and that would prevent inflation. That would stabilize the dollar. It would establish a new monetary base based on the amount of currency that basically is in circulation, or the Fed monetary base. See, what the Fed monetary base now is, Federal Reserve, is $2.5 trillion. That could expand to $4 or $5 trillion here in the next year or so. There's $3.2 trillion of Treasury notes that are coming due that have to be rolled over in the next 12 months. So this is absolutely unprecedented. And of course, the smart money is going to say, well, the dollar is going to be worthless. Buy gold or whatever to compensate for the loss of the purchasing power of the dollar. So this paper was presented. I've seen several other variations of it, but this has to be under consideration by, our leadership, our masters of the universe at the Fed and the Treasury, because that's where we're headed. We're headed for a complete chaos as far as the dollar is concerned.
Okay, now I'm just a checkbook mathematician, but it sounds to me like if gold is pegged at $10,000 an ounce, then consumers, based on the current minimum wage and what their spending power is now, are they're going to be hurting worse than they are today, because if gold is $10,000 an ounce, that would mean that the price of bread is roughly $10 a loaf.
Yeah. Well, it would be a complete repricing mechanism. I mean, everything would change, and incomes obviously have to change in relation to, if you raise prices of everything across the board, then obviously incomes have to rise commensurately or whatever. But what we're seeing is the failure of our present monetary system. That's what we're seeing. The fiat money system. And what the answer, what the solution is, what these people are going to come up with, we're running out of time. We're running out of time, and we're running out of options. And I think the Federal Reserve, within the next 30 to 60 days, is going to announce a new QE3 program. They won't call it that, but a bond buying program, because the Treasury is running a deficit of $5 billion a day, cash flow deficit. And all these notes are coming due for rollover, and there's a lot of people, the Chinese amongst them, are not going to roll them over. Just like we're not rolling over Greek debt right now, or the banks in Europe, they don't want to roll over Greek debt, so it comes up for renewal, and there's no renewal, and there's a default. So we're at that tipping point right now, in my opinion.
With that in mind, what's your advice to the average consumer right now?
Well, I think that in the early stages of an inflationary thing, as we saw in 2009, 2010, there were opportunities to make money in the stock market, in the commodities market. We saw what happened to gold. Gold sold off 33% in 2008 when the market crashed, but it only took 3.5 months before it was back to $1,000 an ounce again. So my feeling is that maybe the Fed will buy gold at $2,500 an ounce, and then when they get it in the Treasury, then they'll revalue it to $10,000 an ounce. That's what FDR did in 1933. They called in the gold. They paid my parents $20 an ounce for it, and then they revalued it $35 an ounce and shored up the Treasury, and then they had the money to finance all the WPA and the CCC and all of the other different alphabet soup that they had in the Roosevelt administration. So something like that is going to happen, in my opinion.
That almost sounds good for people in a position to take advantage of it. For those of us who may have bought gold back at $250, or those of us who may have bought silver back in the days when silver was just $2.50 an ounce. There's some really wild opportunities here. But if you're Mr. and Mrs. Joe Sixpack and you cannot afford to short the bond market, other than paying off your car note, keeping your plastic clean, and having a few extra cans of beans laying around the house, what do you do?
Well, there's very limited. And of course, unfortunately, it's the monetary system that's bankrupted the country. And there's the huge percentage of the population, I don't know whether it's 85 or 90% of the population, there's very little that they can do, and they're going to have to accept what it comes out of Washington and what comes out of the Federal Reserve. And that's just, it's been 40 years we're getting to this point, but it hasn't occurred overnight. And the people that have paid off their homes and they paid off their cars and they put some money in the bank or they put some money in gold, they're going to survive, and they're going to be better off for it. But beyond that, it's very difficult to determine, where we're going to end up.
Well, I certainly do appreciate your honesty, and so I want to I'll ask one last question here. If there is one, what is the L Quist solution?
Well, in my talk yesterday or Wednesday, I told a group of real estate people, I said, they're going to reinflate. They're going to try to reinflate. They're going to avoid deflation at all costs. And usually in the early stages of a reflation, their strategy to print a lot more money is that you get a rise in values. That may be an opportunity for people to sell their homes, convert some of that cash to gold and to other assets, natural resources, and so forth, and to make income, to make sales, to businesses should go through a period of increased gross revenues and net profits. Hopefully we'll have what von Mises described as a crack-up boom. During the boom period, you can make money and put some money away, but then the crack-up is coming, which happened recently in Argentina. It's happened, and it happened basically in Russia, in a lot of countries that had the inflation boom that came out of control, and then you have the crack-up, which is deflation and, unfortunately, depression. But Bernanke is going to do everything he can to prevent deflation and depression, and the only solution they have is to keep printing money.
Yeah, that's a very stark reality, but I want to thank you for that honest assessment. And how can people get a hold of you if they're interested based on what they've heard in the show today?
Well, yes, I think the best way to get a hold of me is through my, the easiest way to circumvent it if you don't get online, or maybe people don't have online, is access is hlquist@cox.net. People feel free to contact me. I get emails from all over. It's HLQUIST@cox, COX.net. Well,
thank you very much for your time.
Justin, it's great to talk to folks in Alaska and other places. It's just a great place, and I hope this message resonates with your audience.
Now, it has been said that the likelihood of a financial collapse depends entirely on which side of the financial chasm you happen to be on, and, as you've heard in the last 40-odd minutes here, L Quist has had a great deal of food for thought here to lay out for your buffet and your consideration. So, if you like what you heard here today, you can find us online at www.politicsandpatriotism.com, where I promise you we have a few more golden oldies like this still in the vault. We intend to lay them out for your presentation here in the not-too-distant future. We have a lot going on behind the scenes. The people at Smart Radio Network have been very supportive of us, and we are grateful. So with all that in mind, if you go to our homepage, you can subscribe to our RSS feed and get all of our past episodes for free. Or you can go to the iTunes store and download all of our past episodes for free. Or if you go to the aforementioned Stitcher.com, thanks to the very nice people at Stitcher Smart Radio Network, they've got a whole stack of free apps for you. They've got an Apple OS waiting for your tablet. They've got an app for your Android device. Yeah, just hold up the cue card there so I can read it a little bit better. They've got an app for your Android phone, and they've got another app for your iPhone, and all of that stuff is free so that all you mobile types can take us with you wherever you want to listen to us on this green earth. So on behalf of everyone here at the show, thank you very much for your time, count your pennies, and have a good day.